Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sherie Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm David.
And I'm Sherie.
And today we want to talk about something that I've been thinking a lot about, and Sherie helps me to balance this, and this is going to be a discussion that we work through because I definitely want understanding and openness, but it's also a topic that can be challenging because we often already have formed where we feel we are, and it can be hard sometimes to consider different perspectives.
Yes.
And you might be thinking, well, what?
You're hedging around a lot, David. Now I'm getting nervous.
What is this? So this is a good one, though. What I've been thinking a lot about is victimhood.
Yeah.
And overcoming victimhood. First, of course, just really understanding what it is, and then not leaving you there, but what do we do? And in this sense, this is everybody.
Right.
At times and in places in our lives, and much of it justified. So this isn't meant to be like if you've ever felt like a victim, you're not.
Or you've ever been in a space where you've had abuse or maltreatment, or you've been hurt in some way.
We're trying to get you out of that mentality. There's legitimate,
out of the holding on to it,
right,
and the negative effects that can come as a result of holding on to it and not being able to move through that space, right? Being a victim is one thing, right? Having had something happen to you, that's one thing, right?
So the challenge is in separating that.
Holding on to victimhood, right?
Yeah.
Kind of steeping yourself in it, getting comfortable there, and not, now what do I do? How do I move forward? Right. That's the tricky part.
You could almost say, being a victim, how do I not go into victimhood despite being a victim?
Yes.
In other words, kind of, it's a where is your power?
Exactly.
Ultimately. And this is made trickier too by when whatever happened, how close is it? How did it impact relationships? Because it takes a while to just get out of actual being a victim from something that has been very hurtful or harmful.
Right.
And so if we can somehow differentiate this, I think this will be really helpful, that you can be a victim and we still want to avoid a victim mentality for the negative side effects that brings. Right. And so hopefully as we talk about this, those two become a little bit more clear, because at one point or another, we're all victims. But if we get stuck in a mentality, how does that impact our quality of life?
Exactly.
Beyond the thing that's happened.
Exactly. And I love what you're saying, because obviously this is a topic that is very, comes up a lot with betrayal trauma. Right. Right? Because there is there's betrayal.
There's betrayal.
There's mistreatment.
Yep.
Right? And so this is let's consider where you may be at, where you may want to just look at things. Are there ways that I can show up differently for myself, to regain my power in my life instead of handing that over to someone else who maybe they're working on things, maybe they're not. Right. But anytime you put your power in someone else's hands, you're going to lose because they're not perfect. Right. As we look at that, right? I've had clients, I've had people that struggle a lot with this concept of, I've had clients that said, don't ever use the word codependent with me, because I didn't know that this addiction was going on. I had no idea. Right. And so then The conversation is what is triggering about this space, right? And you may not have contributed to that
Right.
betrayal.
Right.
That's not the only thing that has to heal in this situation, right? Like if we've talked a little bit, I know we've talked in past episodes a long time ago, we've kind of given you the visual of my Venn diagram that I do, where there are 3 circles in rebuilding and healing after addiction and betrayal. And sometimes we think about relationship as being 2 circles that overlap, and that overlapping space is the relationship. That's inaccurate and unhealthy, because if one person removes themselves and you've got a hole, there's just all these kinds of problems if they're not in your circle as much as you think they should be, as overlapping as much, right? Really, what relationship and what healing and all these things, there are 3 separate entities that have to be healed. There's you, there's the other person, and there's the relationship. And so when we can differentiate between us, what's our stuff that needs to be healed, what's their stuff that needs to be healed, and what is relationship stuff that needs to be healed, we're going to get a lot better, bang for our buck, and we're not going to get stuck as much in I can't move on because there are these relationships. And it helps us to be able to identify, okay, so maybe there was a betrayal that happened that is affected me, but also let's look at, okay, can I be differentiated enough from the relationship and the other person enough to see how could I do things better in my relationship?
Right. And I like the same concept, the way in my brain it works is with buckets.
Yes.
And this idea that you have your bucket right in front of you, but only you can take from that bucket. It's like it's out of reach. Nobody else has access to take from that bucket. It's a very sacred space. And I like to think you and your higher power, that is the bucket. And over on your right or left, kind of in your periphery, is the relationship bucket. But it's not the one right in front of you. In other words, it's not the most important bucket in your life. And you have to kind of turn your head to see it. And that bucket, both contribute, both take.
Yeah.
And so you can have an experience where your partner comes along with a sledgehammer and just smashes it. And it can't hold water or trust in this case.
Right.
And the only way to even begin rebuilding is to piece by piece put that back together, bond it, wield it, glue it, whatever visual you like. And then once it's back together, hopefully it can hold trust or water, and drop by drop we start to fill it back up. But all during this process, your bucket is still the one front and center. And so because of podcast episodes, we like affirmations, and the original are,
yes,
I am a child of God. My worth is 100%. I'm lovable as I am. I can manage my emotions in healthy ways. And the final one is I am responsible for my happiness. And so this idea that your bucket, that circle, your circle, is the one that determines your happiness.
Yes.
The relationship can add, but it can't take. It's almost like the worst your partner can do is completely destroy the relationship.
Yes.
Not you. And that differentiation, I know it sounds kind of maybe obvious, but when we're in it, it's really hard to separate those two out.
Not feel like your life might be over.
My life is over, and I am waiting with great anxiety on pins and needles for what they're going to do before I can feel good, be happy, move on, find peace or rest or whatever.
Right.
And we don't want that to be the holding pattern you're in. We don't know what they're going to do. We don't know where they're at. They may move forward. They may need a while being where they're at. They may move backwards. Right. Either way, we want you to feel empowered. We want you to feel not like you're not going to be sad or mourn or grieve, because that's an important relationship, right?
Yeah. Or even feel anger.
Or anger, absolutely. Just to have your power back.
Yes.
And so this is
what I love so much about this, is because I think, it's important. And again, with something like betrayal, something like that, where you didn't know what was happening and all of a sudden you know, right? That's a really big deal. And especially in situations where you have been gaslit about its existence, that it's even been a thing, and you've been made to feel the one that is crazy, or the one that is, ridiculous, or the one that is, you're making this up, or you're the one that's bringing all the problems to the situation. You just make it bigger than it is. All of these types of things. This topic can feel triggering.
Right.
Because now somebody's coming in here telling you, like, maybe you have a part in this contribution, or there's something that you can look at and change, right? That can feel very, very triggering, because you were absolutely victimized, and you've been told for so long that you weren't, and that wasn't even a thing, right? And so this is why I think this topic is so very tricky, because you absolutely were victimized 100%. And we also want to look and see, okay, can you move forward from that? We don't want you to get stuck there, because that's where everything comes to die. And you just can totally shut down in that space and never be able to move on. And so this is a space of saying absolutely 100% it happened. It should never have happened.
It should not have happened.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, we want to make sure you have your power to move forward and not get stuck in the negative effects of that situation.
Right.
Right.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Separating those out.
Kind of like someone like chops your foot off or runs over you with a car, right? Like, if you don't do anything different, right, you're going to bleed out there.
Yeah.
You're going to die. You're going to bleed out. And it can feel, when you get hit by a car, like this is not my fault. Like, this never should have happened.
Right.
All of those things. And
Right.
and there's tons of emotions that come with that, and a lot of pain, grief, anger, a lot of things you have to work through. But if you choose not to make shifts or changes and be responsible for your own part of that healing, then whatever level you choose not to do that is going to affect you. You may be able to walk again because you got work for your broken ankle, but you didn't get help for your punctured lungs, so you will never really run again or climb a flight of stairs, right? So, and I know that tons of you are doing so much work around healing from the betrayal trauma. It can feel like, we're putting something else on you, or there's something, but we want to make sure you're getting all of the parts of you healed, and that you can separate out that space between being victimized and getting stuck there.
Right, which is a tricky thing to talk about. And I'm glad Sherry's helping me to talk about this, quite honestly, because I think her perspective is really important in this. And if it were just me, I don't know that I would communicate it as well. But she knows what she's talking about in terms of, let's say you get hit by a car, and now you have healing that you need to go through. Well, being angry that it happened is normal and natural. Getting stuck in it now starts to prevent healing. It wasn't fair what happened. It should not have happened what happened. And yet you still have to work on recovery. You still have to work on healing. That analogy you used a long time ago, I don't know if it's in our podcast or not, but let's say he's driving, he runs the red light because he's texting or not paying attention. The car hits on your side. You get the broken back. You have to go into traction. You have to learn to walk again. It wasn't your fault. And yet, if you don't do the healing, there just won't be healing.
Yeah.
I mean, he can try, and sometimes they're really good at trying and being honest and open and willing. Sometimes it takes them a while. Sometimes they're in their own sort of...
Sometimes they get defensive about it for a while, or they're in too much shame to engage in the ways that they need to engage.
It's all sort of broken, and now they just feel terrible and worthless, and which isn't very good for healing because they're not showing up. And and what do you do? What can you do? Ideally, they're being wonderful and honest and moving
Yes.
through a process. But don't allow your recovery to be dependent upon where they're at.
Right.
And that's sort of what we're talking about. Again, whether it's the circles or the buckets, don't forget the most important bucket in your life is the one right in front of you. It's
Right.
yours. And you have a lot more power maybe than you think. And this isn't to say everybody listening, nobody's taking their power, nobody's doing this the
Right.
right way or something. No,
Yes.
that is not at all.
It's
Just
something to consider.
something to consider in terms of what we see as therapists working with clients, issues that we see that we want to bring up and talk about. This has been a big one.
Yeah.
For me.
So not everybody maybe needs to worry about it.
Right.
And those that do, again, you're on a spectrum. Like you may be nearly perfect, but you've got
Right.
this, ripped off piece of skin on your foot that, you haven't addressed yet, and it will get infected if you don't eventually, right? Some of you might be dealing with the broken leg version or a broken back version where you're really struggling with this space of putting all your power in their court and not addressing it at all, that you're giving them that power, or it could be somewhere in between, right? There's a big spectrum.
Yep.
So in those cases, I think it is just always best practice, right? To say, okay, well, let's listen to this and let's
Yeah.
kind of see where I am. And the thing that is about happens with healing, I feel like too, is the more that you heal, the more space you have to look at things like this.
Right.
So again, you get hit by that car, the first week, you were not thinking about all of the things, right? You're just trying to make it through.
Right.
And survive. And then the more healing that you're doing, the more you are open to some of these spaces. So I know in my personal life, as I've gone through challenging circumstances and situations, that I will be working, I will think I have no part in this space, right? Like there was nothing here. But as I'm able to heal from the trauma that's happening, or, I've created more safety for myself and I have good boundaries around that type of thing not happening again, and you get further into that healing, you can look back and go and see, oh, okay, I have something here that I could work on. I wasn't 100% perfect in said circumstance, right? Or said relationship. And I can work on those things. Now, does that mean that the things that were done to me were like, oh, well, that means it's fine, right? No, we're not getting into all or nothing thinking here.
Right.
We're saying, yeah, I can see that I have a tendency to do this sometimes, and that didn't help the situation, or it's not my best self who I want to ultimately be as my best version of me. And so
Right.
I'm going to work on that. It may be related to the circumstance. It may 100% not be related to the circumstance in particular.
Right.
Right? Like there's no point at which you may be feeling, getting a little defensive when you guys talk about something that's hard. That does not mean that, oh, well, now it's totally negated and it's totally fine that they betrayed
Right.
you in some really massive way.
Right. It's a weird sort of place to be where because you are a legitimate victim,
Yes.
we don't want you to get stuck in victim mentality.
Right.
It's this really interesting,
Yeah.
like you have every reason to be, and it
Yes.
does not serve you if you do.
Just kind of like the forgiveness piece, right?
Yeah,
like when we talk about forgiveness and like it's legitimate to decide like I don't want to forgive you because
Right.
blah, blah, blah. But
Right.
it really ends up being for you.
Right.
Right. And it changes your quality of life to forgive,
Yes.
maybe not necessarily theirs. And that's kind of, where we're coming from. And it's interesting. You see this a lot with people who are healthy and have gone through divorce, that they kind of hit these spaces at the beginning of the divorce where like, oh, it was awful. They were really terrible, but if they're really healthy, eventually they heal enough to work through the point that they can look back and go, okay, where was I not perfect in relationship?
Right.
where do I need to make sure that I am doing things differently in the future?
And why? For what purpose?
So that they have a better quality of life, right? So
Not
I
to
have a better
justify
quality
the
of life.
perpetrator.
Yeah.
No. It's for their own life.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yes.
honestly, I mean, this will be...
And if you are in relationship, right, if they were to continue a relationship, if they have co-parenting, whatever,
Right.
they can show up differently.
Right.
Right? And that helps the relationship for sure, right?
Yeah.
Or even being able to at some point, say, hey, I realize I was not, I didn't show up the best all the time, and I want to apologize for that. I know a lot of divorced people who it's safe enough, right?
Yeah.
In their relationship that they can get to that point and that they can say something like that, right? And that is a beautiful cleansing, healing process for the relationship as well. Right. But even if that's not the case, it's really for you. It's really for you.
And honestly, we would not start, let's say we want to do a podcast on, I don't know, sexual addiction and betrayal trauma.
Yeah.
We wouldn't make the first episode this episode. So this is, I mean, you look at our early episodes and it's steps to recovery, it's boundaries, It's time and space, it's some really important things to happen. Well, now this will be episode 90, 91, right up in there.
Yeah.
We can absolutely safely at this point, I believe, approach this. Would be inappropriate earlier.
Absolutely.
We're not bringing people into the office who discovery was 2 weeks ago and they're having a hard time just functioning.
Let's consider how you're being a victim. No.
No.
Not at all. This is like healing's been happening. Boundaries have been happening. We
have 90 podcast episodes
Yes.
at least before this. So please.
So if we've been working, but or I've been working and I'm feeling a little bit stuck, like I'm not moving forward, or we're not moving forward in the way I was hoping, then we go, okay, maybe consider this. Let's look at it, see what fits.
Yeah, as in with everything else, right?
Right.
It may be a little bit challenging, but trust how you feel about this. And if there's something in this that will be helpful for you, or if you have been feeling a little bit stuck, or I would even say maybe a little bit dependent upon the attitudes and behaviors of your partner to be a certain way for you to feel okay. That's what we want to address. This is what's been on my mind, and I appreciate for sure Sherry's perspective in approaching this in a way that hopefully resonates more.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to spend a couple of episodes talking about this and getting into the nuances. And again, I think a lot of that reasoning behind taking some good, solid time with it is to, again, come from that perspective of this may be something, either a 1% something or a 90% something, or it may not be, it may be a 0% something that you need to consider if you'd like to improve your quality of life.
Yep.
And so I think, we're definitely going to try to use as gentle language as we can, because again, I know how triggering that can be for someone who has been gaslit for so long to believe that they are the problem, the only problem. And if they had made the bed, then I wouldn't have, slept with someone else. Right. Which is so completely ridiculous.
Right.
But we want to try to address it in a way that, we just want you to be able to live your best life. Right.
It really
have
is
the best quality of life. That's
the irony, because you are a victim. Being victimhood resilient is going to make such a big difference.
Yeah, for sure.
And so hopefully these next couple episodes will be helpful. This is probably a pretty good disclaimer, I think.
Yeah, they might be super helpful, and you might make tons of changes. They might be helpful in the way that you look at this and go, because this is kind of my philosophy of life is, okay, share it with me. Let's see. Yeah. Let me look at it, dig into it, and check in with myself constantly. Okay, do I need to shift? Maybe it's a little bit, maybe it's a lot, or maybe I'm like, I'm looking at that and I'm feeling like I'm in a really good place with that. I appreciate the feedback to just kind of check in with myself and be able to, make some hard changes if needed, or to be able to say, that's
good.
Great. I'm feeling in a really good place with this. I'm so glad.
And it may just serve as a reminder.
All right. Well, we're excited to start talking about this, getting into some of these episodes and working on them and through them with you. And hopefully we can do so in a way that is inviting to you to be willing to consider some hard things, or maybe they just won't be things for you at all.
Yep. But we appreciate, your willingness. So stay tuned.
Okay. We'll see you later. Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.